Hello and welcome. I am Lian Bon, and this is the recording of the Law of Duterte Land podcast. I know we've been on a long hiatus, but we're coming back to you with an episode on the burning issue in the campaign, which is the estate tax debt of the Marcoses. The executor, yung front runner, the presidential candidate Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. And I know taxation, estate tax, everything about it, everything that has to do with tax is complicated. So we've called in an expert to explain it to us. We have for this episode, Attorney Mickey Ingles. If-flex ko lang yung credentials niya dahil nasabihan siyang instant lawyer on Twitter. He is the 2012 bar top-notcher, teaches tax law among others at the Ateneo Law School, and author of the book Tax Made Less Taxing. Hello sa'yo, kamusta?
Hi, okay naman. I brought my water today in case anyone's wondering.
The trolling on Twitter hasn't affected you at all.
No, I find it pretty funny. At least people are more aware about estate tax because of it.
Correct. And makakapag-promote ng libro mo. Tax Made Less Taxing. Okay, simulan na natin yung discussion. For a lot of people, parang baka bago sa pandinig yung estate tax. We all know about income tax because we pay and file it every year. So, what is estate tax and how is it different from income tax?
Okay, so estate tax, technically it's the tax on the right to transmit property at the time of death of a person, right? So, hindi natin siya masyadong nakikita. Nafe-feel lang natin siya if a loved one passes away, especially if that loved one is your parent or your grandparent, because for the properties to be transferred to you as the heir or as yung tagamana, kailangan ng estate magbayad ng estate tax. So doon siya pumapasok. Every time someone dies, it's required by the law for the estate to pay estate tax in order for the properties to be transferred to the heirs. So ganun siya gumagana. Iba siya sa income tax. In income tax kasi any money that comes into you, it's a form of income, kailangan mo magbayad. Remember, it's malapit na mag-April 15, so income tax season. Estate tax, you pay that when someone dies. Like within a year after someone dies. So ganun siya gumagana.
Alright, so lahat naman tayo, syempre, di ba? Lahat ng kamag-anak na mamatay tayo, all of us. But do all of us have an estate? Paano kung sabihin ng isang taong, all my father owns, all my dead father owns was a house. Do I have to pay estate tax for that?
Yeah, definitely. Everyone has an estate when they die. As long as you have property, you have an estate. The question na lang is, kailangan mo ba magbayad ng estate tax? Kasi may mga minimum requirements ng law. But kunyari, like you mentioned, if your father has a house, tapos namatay siya, hindi malilipat yung bahay na yon sa pangalan mo. Like yung titulo ng bahay na yon sa pangalan mo, unless magbayad ng estate tax. Kasi under the law, registrable properties like your house or like your car or share stock cannot be transferred to an heir unless magbayad ng estate tax. So, ganun siya gumagana.
Meron ba tayong estate tax rate?
Yeah, right now, the estate tax rate is 6%. 6%. Flat rate siya.
Alright. At tumaas ba yun over the years or it's been like that since we can remember? So, since EDSA, for example.
Bumaba na siya. Like, I wasn't super familiar with the estate tax rate nung time na namatay si Ferdinand Marcos, but I mean, according to the Facebook post ni former Commissioner Henares, it was 60% at that time. So right now, it's 6%. 6% of your net taxable estate.
Alright, punta tayo dun sa tanong na ikinagalit ng isang supporter ni Senator Bongbong Marcos. There's an analyst kasi who's not a lawyer who said, if you charge tax on the estate of the late dictator, then you're saying that the estate is not ill-gotten. Can you clarify?
All right, so that's wrong logic and a wrong understanding of the law, because under the tax code, it includes all properties. Nandun yung word na all properties, whether it's real or personal, tangible or intangible. papasok yan sa gross estate. So, it doesn't make any distinction whether yung property na yan was legally acquired or illegally acquired, such as ill-gotten wealth. So, as long as that property is yours at the time that you die, pasok yan sa gross estate mo. Tapos, tatamaan yan ng estate tax.
Yung isa pang counter ng mga taga-suporta ni dating Senador Marcos is that ang estate tax, sa estate mo singilin. Huwag mong sa tao singilin. So, do you charge the estate dun sa bahay, kunwari, or sa mga alahas ni former Congresswoman Imelda Marcos sa mga painting? Paano ba magbabayad ng estate tax?
Okay, well, to be clear, right, taxes are paid by cash, right? Binabayaran niya ng cash. Tapos yung sa property tax. Kasi minsan nalilito yung tao eh. Kasi estate tax is different from real property tax, which is sometimes also called real estate tax. So yung estate tax, yun yung tax na binabayaran pag may mamatay. Yung real property tax, yun yung taxes na binabayaran as connected to the property that we own. Kung may ari kang lupa or condominium, magbabayad ka ng real property tax or real estate tax. That's totally different from estate taxes. Estate taxes, what happens here is when someone dies, kinukuha natin yung fair market value ng lahat ng properties ng taong yun at the time of his death, right? Once we get that value, we do some subtractions kasi the tax code allows some deductions from gross estate. Because when we come up with a net taxable estate, doon natin tatamaan ng 6% taxable, 6% estate tax return. And whatever you get from that multiplication is what you or really won't care where you get the cash to pay it as long as mabayaran mo siya. Right? So kung sinasabi nilang kailangan i-attach yung property, ganyan-ganyan, attaching a property, like levying property, that's another way of the BIR to collect the money. But if you have that cash, right, pwede mo nang bayaran yun, right? Di ba? Parang hindi ka na maguluhan. Kung may cash ka naman, bayaran na. Di ba? So that's how it goes. So it's not attached to the property. The property or the value of the property is only needed in order for you to determine magkano yung babayaran tax. Ganon siya gumagana, right? And the next step is, pag mabayaran na yung tax na yan, pwede nang ilipat yung property sa heirs. Kasi pwede na siyang kumuha ng, pwede na siyang pumunta sa Register of Deeds para palitan yung pangalan sa titulo para malagay na sa heirs. So that's the condition. So minsan may mga sinasabi sila, hindi pa pwedeng, parang pababayaran yung estate pa naman nilipat. Again, that's wrong. Because paying the estate tax is the condition para malipat yung title ng property sa mga heirs. That's how it works, okay?
Nabanggit mo yung magle-levy ka ng property. So for example, ako, sinisingil ako ng estate tax pero wala talaga akong cash na pambayad. Pwede ko na lang i-allow yung, kunyari, meron akong isang bahay sa bukid that's equivalent to my estate tax. Pwede ko ibigay yun sa BIR and they can auction it off.
Yeah, they can auction it off and then the proceeds will be used to pay for your tax. Right? Marami nagtatanong din, parang, paano yung mga finorfeit tapos sinis ng PCGG? Hindi ba pwede yun yung pambayad ng tax? Number one, iba siya. Kasi yung power ng PCGG was to sequester ill-gotten wealth. Yung PCGG, hindi yan taga-kolekta ng buwis, hindi yan taga-kolekta ng tax. Yung nagko-collect ng tax yung BIR. So, kunyari may mga properties, yung si late Ferdinand Marcos na sinequester ng PCGG, hindi yon yung sinasabi ng mga taong pwedeng gamitin pambayad ng tax kasi it's a totally different basis. Basis for PCGG is to sequester ill-gotten wealth. The basis ng BIR is to collect taxes. So they're totally different.
All right. And this was the explanation earlier March ni Attorney Vic Rodriguez, yung tagapagsalita ni Marcos, na sinasabi niyang kasi nagkasundo naman daw na wag mo nang galawin yung mga under litigation pa. The reason why I asked yung kanina yung pwede kang mag-levy sa property is kung meron pang mga property na nasa kanila at tinatry sequester ng government at ayaw nilang ipa-sequester kaya nga under litigation, is that refusal to pay the estate? Kasi pwede naman na nilang ibigay, diba? And that can depend.
Well, a taxpayer, whether it's the Marcoses or us, can always refuse and always question the levying and the collecting of taxes. right? Because that's your right under the tax code. You can question it, right? But the thing here is, in that case nga, the 1997 case of Marcos versus Court of Appeals, number one, the Marcoses did not file an estate tax return for the late Ferdinand Marcos, right? Which they should have. And number two, once the BIR assessed them for estate taxes of, I think that was 23 billion pesos at that time, hindi rin nila question. That was their chance not to question it, right? So, in other words, they had their chances to question the assessment. And Mark, in that 1997 Supreme Court case, sabi ng Supreme Court, since hindi nyo question yun, it's just a matter of collecting it now. So that's the ball game right now.
Yeah, naalala ko nga parang I think Marcos cried violation of due process pero sabi ka sa kanya ng Supreme Court na if you cry violation of due process, you must come to us with your hands clean. Hindi rin naman. Yung delaying tactics, it's been accused of, the Marcoses have been accused of that in so many decisions. As an ordinary person, nakikita ko kasi, mag-file na lang ako na mag-file ng kung ano-ano, keep it under litigation, so I do not pay anything. Is that a fair observation?
Well, I'm not privy to everything that they've been filing, but as an ordinary citizen, who at least knows that in 1997, the Supreme Court said the estate tax assessment is final and executory. And until now, we don't know really what's going on. And news reports came out that the BIR said they're still trying to collect now 203 billion pesos. It just makes you wonder what's really happening and what's really going on.
Nabanggit na nga kanina yung you're trying to make a distinction between the job of the PCGG, which is that hindi sila yung taga-kuha ng buwis. So say for example, nanalo yung PCGG sa isang sequestration case. So ibig sabihin, pag nakuha yun ng PCGG, hindi iyon ang kabayaran sa estate tax.
No, as far as I know, that's not the job of the PCGG. The job of the PCGG is not to collect taxes. It's the BIR's job to collect taxes. Right? So it's totally different. So if they sequester properties, the Supreme Court decision in 1997, which says that the assessment is still final and unappealable, still remains. Right? Regardless kung may makollect yung PCGG na sequestration. Kasi wala kang kinalaman yun sa pagbayad ng taxes. Right? So again, PCGG, ill-gotten wealth, BIR, taxes. They are totally different entities.
That's so much clearer to me. That's certainly tax made less taxing as far as I'm concerned. Punta tayo dun sa, ito, sinabi to ni Mayor Isko Moreno on the sidelines of the COMELEC debate. He had a warning kasi, sabi niya, and please correct him if merong mali, every 5 years lang ang right to collect ng BIR. So if Marcos wins and then he doesn't, the BIR under him doesn't send a demand letter within 5 years, lapse or burado daw ang 23 billion and potentially 203 billion estate tax.
I'm not so sure about the basis of what Yorme said. From what I know, the prescriptive period, meaning the period that you have to collect, is 5 years after assessment. Right? And we learned from that 1997 Supreme Court case that the collection, the levying that the BIR did was within the time period, at least of that time. I think that time it was 3 years. Right now it's 5 years. I'm not sure if you have to keep doing it within every 5 years, but like since we all know that the BIR is under the Secretary of Finance and the Secretary of Finance is under the President, since it's all within the same executive branch, it's always up to the president kung gusto nga ba niyang ipatuloy yung pagkokolekta ng taxes, right? I mean, pwede naman niyang kausapin, diba? It's within his discretion. Although it's mandatory, of course, to collect those taxes, the president can say, look, we can forgive, or we can abate, or we can do something about it, diba? So maybe that's where Yorme was coming from. But under the tax code, it just says prescriptive period of 5 years to collect the taxes.
From the assessment.
From the assessment. Yeah.
All right. So hearing all of this, syempre, it still makes somebody wonder na, how come 25 years ganon? What's wrong? Is it just the enforcement or there's something fundamentally wrong with the tax code? Why we let someone so powerful? I mean, di naman sila naghahanap ng taong sisingilin nila, di ba? They're not poor. Bakit ganon?
Uh, if I knew the answer, then maybe I would give it, but I don't know the answer. I don't think there's anything wrong with the tax code because it's pretty clear, right? Um, Everyone has a duty to file their tax returns, whether it's an income tax return or an estate tax return. Kung mali yung na-file mo, mali yung nilagay mo doon sa tax return mo, ma-assess ka ng BIR. Kung hindi ka nag-file ng tax return, ma-assess ka pa rin ng BIR. Kung ma-assess ka ng BIR, you have a chance to question that assessment. That's due process. Kung hindi may question yun, like what the Marcoses did in that 1997 Supreme Court case, so the assessment will be correct and valid and unappealable because you already had your chance. Everyone has, like, under the tax code, everyone naman is seen equal. Maybe it's just the implementation, but again, I can't speculate or I don't know, guess why this is happening.
Maybe that's for voters to think about na lang, no? Yung ano lang, yung estimate this was an estimate by the group of Attorney Ted, yung 203 billion. Medyo malaki yung talon, pero ganun ba talaga considering 25 years and you account in surcharge, penalty, and interest?
Yeah, it can get that big kasi right now kasi we're in the train era, right? Nung pinas ng 2018. Before train came along, the interest rate for unpaid taxes was 20%. Right? Now it's 12%. So assume 20% of how many billions every year for past 25 years plus surcharges of 25%. Pwede talaga siya umabot ng 203 billion. Although I haven't done the math, right? I don't wanna do the math. Pero feeling ko pwede siya umabot na ganun. Maybe the trolls can do the math since magaling naman sila mag-research on their own.
Correct. Oo nga, mag-math sila. As a last question, this boggles the mind of many people, including me. Obviously, I don't have 203 billion pesos. Tapos, mas mataas pa siya twice. Kasi di ba nga, yung issue ng excise tax, kaya ayaw isuspend ng DOF is because we will forgo daw more than 100 billion in profits. Imagine that's the estate tax that is twice what we will forgo with excise tax. Can somebody have that much money? What is 203 billion? Please help us, mga ordinaryong tao, to understand.
203 billion pesos. I can't even imagine how many, kung gaano kabigat yun in 1,000 peso bills. But it's a lot. But take note that 203 billion, mahirap din eh. It's mind-boggling, right? So, I can't, na-imagine ko lang din, it's a lot of BTS tickets.
And we also have to point out that if they paid it in 1997, it wouldn't have gone up to 203 billion. They had the chance to pay 23.
Yeah. Parang they could have ended it all there.
Pahabol lang na question. So if in 1997, that's my 5 years prescriptive period, 23 billion will stay 23 billion for 5 years after 1997.
No, what happens is, so I'm not sure when they did the assessment back in the 90s. So once they give the assessment, may 5 years na, right? Or baka nung time na yun, 3 years pa yung prescriptive period. Ngayon 5 years na. So once ibigyan ka ng assessment, tapos hindi mo pa binabayaran at the deadline, yung interest nun tumatakbo na. Hindi nagsa-start yung interest after the 5 years. Nagsa-start yung interest upon the demand of the BIR. And also, nagka-start yung interest at the time that you should have paid it in the first place. Right? So, kunwari, kulang yung binayaran mo for income tax noong April 15, di ba? Nagkulang ka ng 5 pesos. Tapos nagbayad ka 10 years from now. The 5 pesos, yung interest niya, i-reckon yun from April 15 when you should have paid it. Not at the end of the 5 years. I hope that's clear. Mas maganda siya kung may timeline pero mahirap right now.
No, that's very clear. You've answered so much burning questions in my head in just 19 minutes and 43 seconds. So, maraming salamat. Thank you for giving the time to Rappler and for explaining estate tax debt at the risk of being trolled again by the very earnest supporters. Maraming salamat. That was Attorney Mickey Ingles. I am Lian Buon. Thank you for listening and watching Law of Duterte Land podcast.